Hey everybody, welcome to Everything Metaverse. I'm Bobby Carlton. Of course, I'm joined by my good friend Pete. And if
Hey,
you notice, we're back in AltSpace VR. We haven't been in this space in a while. And of course, what's really different about this version is this is the space that Pete built and ported into AltSpace VR, so which is really exciting. And we're actually going to go on a journey. We're actually going to go and revisit all the spaces that we have our FS Studio VR Hub into. And we're going to talk a little bit about the pros and cons. And of course, we're going to start today off with AltSpace VR. Pete, you were in charge of doing this. And so let's dive into it. What were the pros and cons of porting this world into AltSpace VR? And maybe we could talk about the potential of that.
sure. And I mean, it's important to distinguish between whether you're talking about a user coming in to AltSpace or whether you're talking about a creator creating things in AltSpace. So there's pros and cons for each sort of aspect of that. One of the things we're interested in is we want to build spaces for our clients where they can invite people to come in. The people come in with very little friction. And by friction, we mean do they have to create an account? How long is the URL you have to type? You're just clicking on a link. What if you're out riding on a bus? That's a great place to have a QR code so that you can take a picture and use it later. So there's a lot of different aspects of VR worlds that we're looking at. Let's start with the low friction aspect, and we talk about
Okay.
AltSpace. Unfortunately, for right now, you do need to create an account to come into AltSpace. So there is quite a bit of friction on that end to just being able to put a QR code, for example, on a bus stop. That's not going to basically get most people into your experience in here. So that's one of the cons of AltSpace.
Mm-hmm.
But on the pro side of AltSpace, it has been around for a very long time, and it's fairly stable and it's fairly mature technology. So the feature set is fairly rich. There are a lot of people who do have AltSpace accounts, and they tend toward the more sort of serious VR people who, because there's a rich event system in here as well. So there's a lot of people who come in here and interview people like we're doing now.
Right.
I mean, before we went on our little, we started to branch out. We were doing our podcast from here. So it is a popular place for people to do podcasts and to have virtual meetings in. And so a lot of people do actually have accounts.
And like you mentioned earlier, right? When you get an AltSpace account and when you log in, you'll see a menu of all these different events that users are creating. And like there's comedy shows, there's movie night, there's yoga. There's even a church that meets on Sundays in AltSpace VR. And of course, I've hosted events in AltSpace VR over the past years. I've done events for the VR awards. I've done events for Get Social. I've done even my own events. And creating events is actually not that hard. Of course, in those situations, you mostly are likely using the AltSpace VR templates. But in this situation, this is actually our world. This is a custom-built world. And but just keep that in mind if you're new to AltSpace VR and you jump in, like that. There's all these different things you can jump into and try out.
I've done events and I've gone to events in AltSpace as well, and it's quite well set up for that. And I haven't looked in detail into how much friction it takes to create an AltSpace account, but they're definitely aware that that's sort of one of the things that they want to be able to get people in. And I've heard that they've done some work with being able to use, I'm not sure if it's Eventbrite, I could be wrong there, but I think they have been doing some work to support events that have a ticketing mechanism. And, even though I just got finished saying friction's bad, in some case friction's good. You don't want to have your company's secrets right sitting out on front of the receptionist desk. You want people to be able to go in and have to go in and go through some checkpoints.
It's interesting that you point that out, right? Because we always sort of look at technology and we're always trying to be like, how do we make it a frictionless experience, or how do we make it easier. But you make a point where sometimes we want that friction, or sometimes we want that ability to sort of keep block people from coming in. So that's and the way AltSpace set up, right? It's an open world, and having a ticket system like Eventbrite. I do know, for example, there was a hip hop show. They were selling tickets on Eventbrite, and then they was like this system where you had to then email the creator of the event, and they would give you the private link to the world. But I believe AltSpace is working on sort of smoothing that process down.
That's certainly one of the concerns is, are you able to restrict people from coming in? So in that sense, I mean, it's neither a pro or a con, or it's both, depending on what your use case is. And this sort of emphasizing the idea that we've been looking at all these platforms because like their different use cases have conflicting needs. One VR platform is not the magic answer for all needs. So let's talk about the fidelity, okay? And that sort of ties in with another aspect is like how easy is it to work on and develop for a given platform. So one of the cool things about AltSpace is they leverage the Unity platform as they've built their game using the Unity platform, and the Unity supports various ways to load additional content that wasn't created when they built the binary that you're running on the headset, and that's what allows us to basically bring this geometry into the Unity editor, work with it in the Unity editor, and basically export it from the Unity editor and see it in here more or less the same as we would expect it to run in the Unity editor. So that's kind of a fairly good bonus. It's the what you see is what you get principle.
So that's a pro, right? So you look that's one of the pros, right, of working in AltSpace.
It's definitely. So we will be able to. I'll show you later when we actually go on a tour. But we're able to actually create things like a nice water shader in here, which means we can write some code to do a bunch of magic. It supports animations, Unity animations. So we could have a complicated mechanism running. It doesn't directly support Unity scripting, but that's where this concept, and I hope I get the phrase right, that these they're called NREs, and it's basically an extension that's running on a server somewhere. And I mean, for a world like this, you can't just one of the reasons Unity script doesn't work is because basically everyone needs to see the same thing. So if you want to have some sort of scripting going on, generally that scripting needs to happen on the server, and then the server tells everybody, all of the clients, okay, this is this world, the globe up here is spinning. So looking at the globe behind us, an example, and what we've got is it's a really cool extension someone wrote, and they've incorporated the 3D geometry of the world, but there's also some scripting running on a server somewhere. That's basically, we all agreed when we came in, this extension asked us, is it okay if I use your location? We all said sure.
Sharing our location.
And so now it's able to look up where we are in the world and stick a little pin on the globe up there.
So what's cool, everybody, like if you're watching from home, is there's 3 of us in the world, and if you can see on the map, like you can see Alan, our producer, that's his location. He's in Croatia, while Pete and I are both in the United States, where I'm in New York and Pete's in Canada.
Hey guys, you haven't taken over Canada yet, man.
Not yet.
Wait until you actually take us over before you claim that we're both in the U.S. We're both in North America, okay?
We're both in North America. But yeah, here we are. But obviously, the more people who are in this room, you'll be able to see their location, where they're around, which is really cool.
Exactly, and that's the kind of thing that we need to be able to easily create in a custom space. We get a client, or even like you're having ideas, you're ideating on what should we do for the client, and you want to be able to implement as many ideas as possible without any limitations. So this is a great. I mean, I can think of
Yeah.
all kinds of other reasons to put things up on the globe. So right now it's showing us where we are, but let's say our podcast is being broadcast out there, and we have a web page somewhere that people can go and click and comment
Yeah.
on. We could
I want.
have their comments feeding into the
Yeah.
world here, and little things lighting up from, oh, so and so over there commented. So there's all kinds of
Yeah.
ideas that we could implement with a globe, and basically code that's running in a server on the cloud that's
Hmm.
collecting data from whatever it might be. I mean, we've got this world in here, so let's, now
Yeah.
that I'm
It's very
thinking, if
cool.
we're going to have a world in here, it should be showing us the weather.
Yeah. So what?
So
Well,
let's put
so
the weather on the
that's kind of
globe
a cool.
too.
That's a pro. But so tell me, what would be a con? Like what could you see, or like how difficult was that? Like what was the difficulties, or what? How could this not
Well,
work?
I mean, one of the cons with technology certainly is always you come to rely on it, and then
Hmm.
it's not there all the time. It's a security issue. Somebody can,
Right.
steal your
True. Like
secrets and that
all
sort
of
of
a
thing.
sudden
And so
we
we
know
just,
where Alan is. We're like, oh, let's
well,
go.
there you go, exactly. So, but we did. That's the balance that has to happen in the implementation, where this
Right.
thing asked him if it was okay. And I mean, if Alan was really, if he was in a sort of a place where it was not safe, then he would probably be getting on the internet through a proxy, and it would show him as
True.
coming
Right.
from the
But
Azores or some weird
I
place,
just
right? So,
don't want. I
um,
just want kidnappers to know his location and find him. So that would be terrible.
I this is almost a case of there is no con to being able to extend
Right.
the world. So basically, this is a really big pro in the sense that one of our boxes is how easy is it to extend the world. And for some of the platforms we look at, it's like, whoa, it's really difficult, or even some of them, it's not even possible at all.
Right.
Whereas here, and I've got a bunch of these other things to show you. Here, it's actually quite
So
easy as things go.
what's really interesting, Pete, is like we're in virtual reality, right? And we're in this virtual world and in virtual reality, and we're augmenting our virtual reality by adding this map, which is really cool.
It wouldn't be reality if we could modify it. I mean, that's part of reality is we
Mhm.
can create things in reality. We can invent things. We can have an idea that, hey, we should be a thingamajig that does this, and we can go and create it. In one sense, it's actually easier to create these things because we don't require actual materials. It's just labor.
It's funny. I think about recently, for example, Meta had a new marketing campaign, right? And they had said like the classroom will be code, right? There, and that's part of that campaign that the classroom environment will be made up of code. And really, the learning environment, entertainment, education, enterprise solution, right? This is all made up of code. I mean, they're not totally wrong, and that we could take like work that you do, right? And we're building these type of environments or where it's about education or learning and it's about socializing. So really interesting. But we have this whole world to explore and we have we're going to talk about pros and cons of everything. So Pete, where should we
Well,
go
here,
next?
I'll show you one thing. And we start off with, like, Pete, like, what's with this weird hat you're wearing? Come
I love
on,
the
it's
hat.
not.
I love it.
Well, it's cool, but let's go to the wear a hat thing, and that's
Sure.
a good example of an extension that we've been
Let's
talking
go
about.
down there.
So
We'll meet you
we'll
down
see
there,
you down
everybody.
there. This is one of the examples that they give you when you're learning how to make extension. It's pretty simple. It's showing you a bunch of choices for, I want to wear a hat. I'll click the none right now. It took my hat off. You
How's my
pick
hat
the
look?
top hat. So what we're
Yeah.
doing here in this extension is we're combining geometry. So obviously we've got the 3D geometry, and these are, I believe they're GLB files. This is really also geometry. This panel with the words here and these checkboxes, that's actually geometry as well. But we have interactive geometry, so you probably can't see it. But as I point my controller at these boxes on the left, they have colliders, and I can click on them. And so we're basically able to construct a user interface in the world here with a bunch of choices. And when I click on one, it actually changes the geometry in the world. So I can't tell you how excited I am, and I'm not allowed to use profanity because otherwise
No
I would be going,
profanity.
blah!
No
Because this
profanity.
really, this opens up every possibility you can think of. So one of the use cases that we want to do in here is we want to have our project planning meetings and Scrum processes in here.
Mm-hmm.
And that involves project management software that, we enter projects, tasks, people, we assign it. So we use a system called Asana. It's very good. It's a web-based system, and we do all this stuff. But then every day or every few days, we have a meeting we call like a Scrum meeting. And basically, we just go over the main tickets and go, who's working on what. And so we want to have those meetings in here. One of the things we'd like to do is make a much better environment for doing Scrum. So now that we're able to create user interfaces in 3D, and we've got this thing that this code is running up on a server somewhere in the cloud, and Asana has an API that allows other applications to ask it things like, give me a list of all the projects for this project, give me a list of all the tasks, blah, 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 blah. So to make a long story short, we could actually create a room that has a user interface to let you manipulate the Asana tickets, and would have buttons like you could press a button and it would sort of show you all the tickets for a given task, and you'd be able to put them away by just pressing another button. Basically, this kind of stuff allows us to do any of that sort of thing. I was joking about putting a weather up on the globe earlier, but you could. Now we could have like a control panel like this and buttons on it, and you maybe press this button and it says, show me the weather. You press this button and it says, show me all the users with pins in it.
Right.
And you press another button, it could show you something else. These kind of, one of our project manager called it widgets. So 3D widgets. That's what I'm on about. And I'm so excited. There's so much stuff going on at 3D Studio with new staff coming on, hiring new people, and it's all pointing in the same direction. It's all VR. This is the future Metaverse stuff that everybody is looking for, and we're doing it.
Interesting. Yeah, and we are. There's a lot of things happening. I mean, I knowing the projects that FS Studios doing right now, I know you are absolutely correct. Right, there's just this huge movement in sort of how we are approaching this technology, and how how you're manipulating worlds. Maybe manipulating is not the right word for it, but how you're using your talents and your expertise to create these type of worlds that we can hold Scrum meetings or hold any type of meeting in, right? I mean, you could even have a marketing meeting. You could have you could meet with clients. You could meet with consumers, right, and explore.
I mean, that's the thing. It's so great. We use now. I mean, we've migrated. We use Microsoft Teams to do a lot of our stuff. We also have APIs and cloud-based things where those things could be bought into a world. So my vision is sort of like, okay, and we're this is our CEO's vision as well. I want to create a room So I want to be able to go to a website and go, I need a room that with this,
Right.
you know, and be able to pick some geometry like this. This is a nice room here, but you know, maybe we want some other geometry. So it's kind of like a laundry list. Okay, I want this geometry and I want these features, and the features being, you know, maybe Teams integration. And when you
Sure.
say I want Teams integration, it goes, oh, okay, so do you want, you know, maybe that gives you a bunch of sub options. And one of the sub options is, yes, I want to use Teams. Only people that have a
Yeah.
Teams account can come into your 3D room. Is your room for an event? Does it go away after you use it, or is it a permanent room? So
Right.
there's so many options, but I mean, this is the kind of thing I see is like, oh, I want a Scrum room. So here's a
Mhm.
bunch of options. You want a Asana integration, blah blah blah.
Right.
Yes.
What do you see some of the challenges being, Pete, like in that process? From a developer's perspective, like what would be the challenges?
Well, I mean, the challenge is for it, basically it's per platform. It's like AltSpace has a fairly well developed mechanism for creating these. I'll call them applets. I don't know what exactly. I mean, that's a
Hmm.
term from Java, but it kind of fits. Servlets is maybe a better word because they're running all the time. And
Right.
that's kind of a change from the old days. It's kind of a new capability that opens up all these possibilities. So if you can have, and this is sort of, and it's not a pro con, but I'll compare and I'll contrast. The way Mozilla Hubs works, the way you do code with Mozilla Hubs, you check out the entire source code for the entire Hubs
Right. The
cloud
whole ecosystem. Yeah.
thing. You can go and make a little change. Maybe you can add this little hat feature, but the out of the box, it basically wants you to check the entire whole thing
Hmm.
back in again, and that's pretty risky. And you know,
Sure.
it's not a very modular way to develop. This is very simple. This little thing is a little standalone, a bit of code, maybe you know 2 or 3 source code files, however many 3D models for the hats there are. And the important thing is it all gets packaged into a little bundle and it's running in a little, I call it a virtual machine or whatever you want to call
Right.
it until somebody wants to use it. And then it does its thing and it's done. And that's perfect. And it's sort of, it sounds like something that Unity's doing now that they're calling needle tools.
On Twitter, you and I offline off of here, we were talking a little bit about needle tools, and I actually got to understand a little bit more. Can you maybe just refresh people needle tools quickly?
Okay. So needle tools is basically one of the issues. Okay, so the putting 3D stuff up on the web has been slowly progressing over the years. So being able, the holy grail is being able to go in a web browser, load in a 3D scene, and have a rich experience like you would have on a console or with a Unity app that somebody builds and you download a game and you play the game. The holy grail is kind of have that kind of experience, but through a web browser. There's something called WebXR that has been going along for a while and been developing. And it's now at the point where the main problem with WebXR is you can't run Unity script. But what someone has done, Needle.io, what they've done is they've created a plugin for Unity so that you basically can create a Unity experience
Hmm.
within reason, we're only using the features that they support. And then when you build that, you're not building an application that somebody's going to get an EXE or on a Mac, a DMG, or, you got to build for 10 different platforms. But this way, you only build one bundle and it gets uploaded to a server and it's a node.js thing that's running.
Hmm.
And then you can go to it with your web browser. It presents WebXR. And then inside of that, you have a very rich scripting and you can do a lot of very Unity like games and that sort of thing. It also supports multiplayer, so you can create social experiences with it. And it looks very promising for letting you publish very rich VR worlds without all the hassles of
Right.
setting up a server or log in or any of that. You should just be able to publish it to your own web
Hmm.
page.
Right.
fsstudio.com. Put a button in there that lets you launch right from there directly into a 3D experience, and that could just be no multiplayer. It's a running shoe, and we can spin it around and click on it and see all kinds of cool stuff. But then maybe there is a button in there that says, "Oh, I want to go and play in Running Shoe World," and now you're in a place with other players running around doing some kind of multi-user experience.
We've really focused on some really amazing things that we can do in this space. Again, I think the whole idea is we wanted to sort of dig like, what are the cons? Like, what are the difficulties? And I don't see any big cons of being in a virtual space other than maybe not having like physical contact with people, even though we have that sort of that virtual presence. What would be a con from a developer side, just overall? Like, what are the difficulties? Because I know
Well, a
you and
lot
I
of them
are
are
coming in through
technical.
yeah. Well, you and I are coming from a Quest. Alan was coming in through a MacBook. He's actually coming through WebXR and a Mac. And earlier, before we were shooting this, we had some difficulties, but you fixed pretty easily. But
Well,
is that a
yeah,
big
but I mean,
con
you
or
can't
no?
really blame that. You can't really blame the problem he was having on
Hmm.
anything other than we're we're using our own stuff while we're developing it. So I didn't realize he was coming in on a Mac, and
Right.
I had not built the space for the Mac. So he was seeing an earlier version that I did build for the Mac, but it's
Okay.
actually kind of it actually kind of fun because you and I were seeing a slightly different version of the world
Yeah.
than he was seeing. And that's one of my favorite topics is something I call asymmetric VR. Yeah, the first time I ever did anything was almost accidental back in it was way back in the active worlds days. So before Second Life, I mean, we're talking about shortly after the turn of the century, so 2002, 2003 kind of thing. And there was no scripting at all back then. I mean, Second Life had scripting, but it was Linden scripting language. But back in active worlds days, there was no scripting at all. What I did was basically server side code. So, people would come into a world, the client would fetch a known file from the web
Hmm.
URL that your world, right? And that was basically a scene description. So we basically get a file, and the file would say, okay, there's an object called this and this and that and the other thing, and all the names and positions of the object. And then it would go and fetch them from the server. What I did was I wrote a bunch of PHP scripts so that every object in the world was coming from this server, this
Hmm.
PHP script, question mark, and the name of an object or whatever. So basically on this server, I was able to go, okay, well, this person's asking for a unicorn, but which file I give them is totally up to me. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, so the first thing I did at the time was I said, okay, well, what language is their browser set to? And if
Hmm.
it's English, I will give them this texture, which for a stop sign, it will say stop. But if their language is set to French, I'll give them this other texture. And then if
Hmm.
they see a stop sign, it will say arrête. And so that was basically giving different people a different version of the
Hmm.
world. Unless they talked about it, neither one of them would know, but it would just seem perfectly natural. And you could do it with an object. So you could have an object called policeman, and you could deliver to someone in the US. It would, be dressed in a US
Hmm.
police uniform. But if they were from the UK, it would be a London Bobby, that sort of thing. So you go into the world and it will look exactly like you're expecting, but it's not the same thing the other person's seeing, but it looks exactly like what they're expecting, right?
Ah, very cool. Very. By the way, side note, you're in Canada. Do you speak French? Are you French? You speak French Canadian? in French?
I speak a little bit of French, but I'm not an expert. No.
Okay, I was just a little side
Most
question.
Canadians speak some French if they were raised in Canada.
It was a little
We
side
have
note.
to take French lessons up till grade 7, I believe.
Yeah, I did. I took French. I wish I took French out of high school. But anyway, sorry, Alan. I didn't mean to sidetrack us.
Well, so while we're talking about asymmetrical
Yeah.
VR, you could literally have, because it's in the cloud and because Philips Hue lights are Internet
Hmm.
of Things devices,
Yep.
you could theoretically, I could write some little code that runs in my house here and publishes the color of my Philips Hue lights and have a little cloud thing that ties into this world so that when I muck with my Philips Hue lights at home, the
Hmm.
color in here would change.
Comes in. So
And that's the kind of stuff I'm totally into. Yeah.
I have a great Philips Hue story. I have them built into my house as well. And I was in Cape Cod. My stepson was watching the house for us, and he doesn't know about the lights and what I was doing while in Cape Cod, and I live in New York. I was messing with the lights, and he started texting me. He was like, "Something's up with the lights."
Oh, that's so funny.
So, which is a great. I mean, I love those lights. But yeah, I think it'd be really cool if we could bring that to environment, like the Philips Hue bulbs, like into this world or have it impact this world in some way. That'd be really interesting. And so we were talking now about that idea where reality and virtual reality start to sort of overlap. And we saw it with VR, and then we were like, okay, then there's AR, but now we're just starting to see this sort of frictionless. We'll go back to that frictionless sort of merging of virtual worlds and real worlds, and it's really
What do
cool.
we call that? We got a word for it. We
What's
use it in
that?
hashtags all the digital twins, man. That's what
Digital
a digital
twins,
twin.
exactly. Yeah,
That's digital
yeah,
twins, man.
digital twins.
So that's one of the things I'm excited about, and one of the things of like with FS Studio. Don't want to talk too much about it, but I mean I now kind of have a mandate to play with that kind of stuff and share it with everybody through our social media. We were talking about doing open source stuff so that we can actually truly share, okay, look, we did this really cool thing and now you can play with it. And, oh my God, you did some really cool extension to it. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of looking forward to getting into that, going down that whole path, creating other rooms. We keep showing off this room. I know people, it's a lovely room, but you want to see something new and it's all in the works. It's coming. But in the meantime, I mean, this really is a glorious place to play around. But we're going to have other rooms for you soon, and we're gonna be doing a lot of experiments. And I guess by the time this gets out, it's the cat's already out of the bag now. So we can probably tell everybody that Dilmer, and I only have to say his first name. Everybody knows who we mean. Dilmer is joining FS Studios. So
he's
I
going to
can't
be head of
wait.
R&D. Yep. And I've known Dilmer for a long time, and I've known his work. And as you're right. Dilmer is sort of like this rock star in this sort of the virtual immersive tech world. He's a hacker, a prototyper. He's an explorer, and I know you're familiar with his work, Pete. I used to message Dilmer, a while back, through LinkedIn, and yeah, so he's coming on board at FS Studio as head of R&D, and and he'll be posting his own content, very much like how he's posting content now, but he'll be doing it for FS Studio. Of course, Pete and I and Alan will be working together and doing the work that we're doing, posting content here. And again, this whole series is we're going to just literally jump into all the virtual worlds that we have. We're going to look at the pros, look at the cons, look at what potentially we could do. And of course, Pete, you're always instrumental in all of this. I mean, all this world right here, having you put this into AltSpace was incredible. And I know, you and I went back and forth.
I have to stop you there though, and I have to give full credit to our brilliant tech artist guy. His name's Alvaro Guerra, Guerra. And our brilliant concept artist has been with us at Studio, I think, since the beginning. His name's Pablo Come.
Yep.
COMEI. So Pablo had this is the concept, and all this these floating things, and I don't know. I love the irony that this is in the cloud, but it's in the clouds. I mean, the skybox right from the beginning. The skybox. The first time I came and saw this, that blew me away. It's like, oh my God, I'm way up above. Look, that if and Alan's going to probably show you later, but if you go over the edge there and you look down, the mountains are way down below you, and you're looking at the tops of the clouds, and it's just normally in a skybox. The first thing you do is you go, I want to hide everything below the horizon, but here. No, I mean, it's almost one of the stars of the show is just looking down.
Yeah,
at these
I agree.
Beautiful mountains, man. It's just stunning.
I agree, Pete. I'm with you 100%. I think it's really absolutely awesome. But with that
I'm
said,
jaded. We're both jaded. We've seen a lot of different places, but this is just awesome. And so I like to call this our hub. Our cloud hub in the clouds, because we're in Hub's
it's absolutely
cloud.
Stunning.
Yeah,
it's a stunning spot. But hey, with that said, we know we're creeping up to our time, and of course, Pete, like this is. I mean, we could obviously talk about this for hours, but of course, we've got many other platforms to explore, to talk about today. AltSpace VR, what you've done in this room. Again, taking what our creative team has done and then porting it into here and then doing what you've done, absolutely incredible. I am so looking forward to not only our team meeting and having meetings here, but having us invite other people into this room and just kind of hanging out with us and shooting some basketball hoops and wearing goofy red hats. Of course, big thanks to Alan, our producer, who's always on the other side of the camera, and a big thanks to all of you for listening. My name is Bobby Carlton. Of course, this is Pete Patterson. And Pete, what is your Twitter handle? Your VR Spatialist Twitter handle?
VR Spatialist. SPATIALIST. If you look down there.
Oh, look down. Oh, yeah, that's right. Look down there. That's right. And mine is bcarlton727. Pete and I are always on Twitter. Most likely, if you see an FS Studio tweet, that's most likely from some Pete and I as well. Please interact with us. Please respond, retweet. Please message us, because we do respond, and we just want to hear from other people, other developers, other creatives, and VR and AR enthusiasts. And of course, thank you for watching this episode of Everything Metaverse. And we will see you. What world are we going to next, Pete? What do you think? What are your thoughts?
I think we could do spatial.
All right.
Spatial there.
We'll head over to spatial in the next episode.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Take care.